Come on in, guys, because it's time for another episode of Outwatch, a Survivor Rewatch podcast. My name is Alex, and I am your host and guide through our Outwatch experience, where we are rewatching old seasons of Survivor and recapping and reacting to them live here. I am a self-described super fan, and I'm joined by three of my friends this is their first foray into the world of Survivor. And they are reacting to these seasons for the very first time. We are right in the middle of our Survivor Season 6, the Amazon recap. And today we will be covering episode 4 titled... No, episode 3. Episode 3 titled Girl Power. Didn't want to get ahead of myself there. So why don't you meet the rest of our Outwatch crew, and we will start by allowing them to answer the question that was on my front of mind after watching this episode, which is, imagine that you're there on the island playing Survivor, and you now, 12 days into this game, or 9 days into this game, or whatever it is, get to meet somebody on the opposing tribe for the very first time. We got to see this in this episode, and that led to a lot of awkward interactions. So, Adam, welcome to Outwatch.
So good to be here.
Hey, and I got to know, how would you introduce yourself to somebody on the opposing tribe of Survivor?
This is day 9?
I think
10?
Technically it's like 7 or 8.
7 or 8? Okay, yeah. So I would have died by this point. Probably from a caffeine withdrawal related thing.
Okay.
Potentially from the Amazon itself. But if I were still alive, it would be me covering my face or covering my eyes to keep the sun out. And I would say, I'm Adam.
Cool.
That's it.
Wow, that was
that's the honest reaction.
Hey, Adam.
I wouldn't shake people's hands either, because I feel like that was weird.
That was kind of weird when they would shake hands.
Yeah.
Emily, welcome to Outwatch.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, how would you introduce yourself to an opposing tribe member?
Yeah, there was a lot of uncomfortableness in this little challenge, and a lot of it was a little too flirty for my taste.
There was a lot of flirtiness.
I didn't love it. I'd probably play the song Flawless by Beyonce and just leave it at that. Especially the part where she has that excerpt from the TED Talk about we should all be feminists. That's what I would do. How would you
get an MP3 of Flawless by Beyonce?
I'd probably just have to sing it myself.
Luxury item.
Luxury item.
I've got a chip tunes here.
Advance. So good. What was that? Microsoft Brown?
The Zune?
The Zune. Maybe I'd bring a Zune.
Do you think the Zune came out before the iPod?
I don't know.
It didn't.
It just seems old. I'm not sure.
It does
I picture
feel
like
older.
those hit clips things.
Yeah. Hit clips.
Now we're talking.
What are chip tunes? I said chip tunes thinking that they were hit clips.
Did you just make something
Were
up?
those things that like they only have like 2 songs on them, and
it sounds like hit clips to me. I don't know.
Was it like the
chip tune
off-brand?
is just like a style of music. It's like 70s.
It is a music style.
Yeah.
I just Googled it as well.
Yeah. Okay. Hit clips is what I was thinking of. Good job,
Okay.
Scott.
Well, now I learned something.
Speaking of Scott, welcome to Outwatch, Scott.
Hey, how's it going?
Wonderful. Hey, what would you say to somebody you're meeting for the first time on the other tribe?
Well, I would look around unassumingly and say, hey, I'm Scott. I'm not a threat.
Which means he's a threat. That's exactly what a threat would say.
Not in season 6.
That's true. Not in season 6. This is the crew, the Outwatch crew. Glad that y'all have the chance to meet them. And today we will be recapping episode 3 of Survivor, the Amazon. Why don't you say we start out by recapping what happened in this episode piece by piece. We start on the men's tribe, where we see some tension between Roger and Daniel, some heavy tension regarding camp work and the work ethic. Shortly after that, Matthew has a conversation with Daniel, and they connect over Matthew's ability to speak Mandarin because he was born in Hong Kong. And they form a bond over that. Meanwhile, on the women's side of things, they are dealing with a bit of a bug infestation at their tribe, and their shelter really is in rough shape. At the reward challenge, we have Survivor Go Fish, which inspired this opening question. And the women have a big come-from-behind victory to win toiletries and other soaps, which, are also toiletries. Just toiletries, that's what they get. On the men's tribe, they deal with the coming down from talking to girls for the first time in 9 days, and it's really ugly and bad, but Butch is a nice guy, we find out. Jenna, Heidi, and Shauna, on the other hand, have a conversation about how they plan to use their looks and their charm to their advantage. And then back at the men's tribe, alliances start to form really for the first time that we see. Rob and Alex get together, and then so do Dave and Matthew. We see the strategic switch get flipped, maybe for the first time so far. The women's tribe starts to get organized. They take their fishing poles out, and they really outfish the men at this stage in the game. They bring back some big hearty fish while the men are taking in guppies. Then at the immunity challenge, they do a jail escape challenge, and the women absolutely blast the men out of the water. It's not even close, sending the men to tribal council, where leading up to the tribal council, votes seem to be between Roger and Daniel, but it is unanimous. Daniel is voted out by a vote of 6-1, making him the third person voted out. And a good job on you guys with the draft, as Daniel was one of the 2 players left on the board. So you successfully chose not to draft Daniel. Good job, everyone.
Thanks.
We'll start out with the obligatory first question. Hey, what was your favorite part of this episode? Scott, do you have a moment that really sticks out?
I really don't have a major favorite one. There was a lot that happened, as in every episode.
Lots happens.
The big thing that I took away was that the immunity challenge has been a lot like other immunity challenges that we've kind of seen before, where they gotta like cut stuff and get out of a cage.
Yeah.
But
classic Survivor challenge.
What?
Classic Survivor challenge.
You are not wrong.
I was a big fan of that, actually.
All right.
Like I agree it was pretty repetitive in terms of like the things that they're doing, but I don't know. There was something about it that I just enjoyed.
Yeah. And then besides that, I just kind of like to see the girls getting their crap together, so to speak, kind of electing a leader, and then just kind of like saying, all right, we're going to get this tribe figured out. So it's kind of good to see that initiative, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I was wondering if that leader election was this episode. It was. Yeah, it was. Emily, do you have a favorite moment from this episode?
There was a lot I didn't love, I'll be honest.
Yeah, this is the high point, I think, of the badness.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Yeah,
again, for our listeners, don't watch it. Just listen to us.
Yeah.
We're way better.
The kind of like the dream sequence.
Yeah, that was pretty trash, I'll be honest.
Yeah,
I was pretty disappointed.
That was rough.
But I was with Adam. I liked the immunity challenge because even though, we have seen this kind of sequence before, I was just like kind of on edge waiting to see who would win, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun. And then, I don't know, I was really interested with the decision to vote Dan out. I thought it was very dumb, but it was interesting to watch, I suppose. So it was like my favorite, not in a good way, just something that I would like to discuss further as we move along in this episode. Yeah.
Why do you think that people did land on voting Daniel out?
Adam and I talked about this after, and I was just thinking it didn't seem like because who was he mad with? Roger was mad at him, right?
Yeah,
Right.
it was Roger and Daniel.
When Roger spoke up in tribal council, he was explaining why he was so mad with Dan. And he, even in his explanation, sounded so petty.
Yeah.
Because he was like, well, I asked him to get water and he hesitated. And so I got it myself.
Right.
And he's acting like he's ready to beat him up. I'm like, this is out of this world.
Yeah.
And everyone turns on Dan just because Roger was mad that Dan hesitated for a second about getting water. Like, it just seems very silly. But I think it's probably just a power thing. Like, people want to make Roger happy.
Yeah, I think like remembering to the beginning stages of this tribe where both Daniel and Ryan kind of buddied up.
Yeah, that's true.
And yeah, isolated themselves a little bit. I think it's probably the front facing reason is that like conflict that gets a lot of play, but probably the deeper reason is that like from the beginning, Daniel and Ryan kind of made themselves an entity, and then once Ryan was gone, just the easy thing to do would be to take Daniel out after that.
Yeah, that makes sense. The way it played out in the actual episode, isolated from the rest of the gameplay, though, just seemed very silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we kind of get this, excuse me, we get a better look of Survivor as like these people are tired and we don't see the whole picture, I think.
Yeah.
In these types of early season plays. Because I'm sure we see such a small snippet of what's happening on the men's tribe that there could have been more things too that are annoying Roger. And even if they're small things, like it could be one of those situations where it's just like eating at him. But at the end of the day, what you had was a team of people who have an obvious target in Roger because he's the leader, an obvious person to rally against, but no real reason to get rid of him yet because there's this other target that no one really cares for either, or no one really, seems to care for. Because, I mean, he was out. It was a unanimous vote against him, wasn't it?
Yep, 6-1. Yep.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of those things that I don't know how strategic the play was. I think it was just kind of, it's an easy choice. We'll get rid of him. We'll move on from here. Yeah. This is a really good episode to watch if you're trying to figure out like storylines of how Survivor tells stories. Because when we got to the immunity challenge of this, I looked at Emily and I was like, well, the men are going to lose, right? We spent the entire time building up this, like, this thing between Roger and Daniel. Yeah. And almost no time on the women except for a dream sequence bathing scene.
Yeah.
And then we go to the final, the immunity challenge. Like, it was really obvious who was going to win and who was going to lose. At least I felt that way.
Yeah, I think that's evident of, again, in earlier seasons of Survivor where they're still, they're less, they have less figured out this like balance between not like giving away what's going to happen later with your edit, but still making what happens like make sense, And I think that, early on they lean into, we have to make that like it makes sense when somebody gets voted out. So you're right. They do spend more time on the camp where that loses most of the time. I understand that. I think that's a valid observation. This is one of the, like, honestly, of all the episodes we've watched in like the 2+ seasons of Outwatch, this is just like has been one of the weakest ones that I can remember for like the problematic editing and storytelling regarding like sex and gender. But also from just like the storytelling and like, I don't know, there's not a whole lot of fun stuff, a lot of interesting stuff here. There's like the burgeoning of some strategy, which I think is the richest vein for us to mine this episode. But not a lot of greatness here.
Yeah, and even the reward challenge was, the whole way it was kind of framed is it was supposed to be this really like fun, like, look how much fun they're having kind of feel.
Yeah, and it kind of was fun.
And it's like, I get how they were like trying to get that tone across, but they do so much. They cut in so much of the like flirtiness, and even if it's not actually flirting, they make it look like it's kind of like, oh, it's like flirting, like guys and the girls, they finally get to hang out, like they're at summer camp or something.
Yeah.
That it kind of undercuts that whole mood.
Yeah.
It's the way I kept describing it was it made me itchy. Like it didn't feel right. Like
yeah.
Yeah, they just got all this like random cha-cha music kind of playing.
Yeah, music did not help.
Like, what is happening here?
Yeah. You see, I think this is such like, this would be such an interesting podcast to have, watching it from season 1 to current season, like just straight through.
Mm-hmm.
But since we're jumping around, we're kind of jumping from like really good season to a really good season to a season that is ranked really highly, but I don't believe it yet, which we've said about all the other seasons too. It kind of like, it almost makes the like problems that we see, or the like, you know, that could have been done better, worse, because we've seen it done really well.
Yeah. We just went from 2013 to 2003.
Yeah, so we dropped back a decade. We went from a show that's been on the air for 20 some odd seasons to a show that's been on the air for 5.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a huge difference.
You see how much better they get at some of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that Amazon is a highly rated season, but it's definitely not a god tier season. This is like a upper tier, but not elite tier. And honestly, like, this was partially a selfish choice because I remembered so little from this season and I wanted to watch it again. But yeah, like, this is a well-respected season of Survivor, but definitely not one that many people would place in like their top 5 necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that I mentioned it a minute ago, but one of the most interesting things to come out of this was like the way that some of this strategy starts to bubble up. One of the interesting moments was Joanna and Gene set up Dina as the leader of their tribe, and they talk about it as a strategic choice. Whereas, like saying that she's somebody who already makes herself well known, and this will only add to that. And you also hear from Dina saying that she doesn't necessarily want to do this, again, for strategic reasons. What did you guys think about the thoughts from Joanna and Gene, and then Dina's kind of hesitancy to take up this mantle of leadership as you were watching it?
I think it was an interesting, like you said, burgeoning strategy. I think that was definitely apparent in this choice. But the way that they laid it out afterward, it actually seemed like it worked really well. They had a clip of someone, I don't remember who, it may have been
Shauna.
Yeah, Shauna, who was like, she's kind of bossy, but that's who you want in charge because you want someone to get order in here, and you picked them to do this very job.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a really interesting thing about Survivor is we always kind of talk about how like you don't want to be the leader. It's almost like you just don't want to be the head of the pack that's running off the cliff. Like you don't want to be in charge. You don't want to make yourself known. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, I feel like there's a way that you can be a leader really well in the like, this is what needs done. Like, we need to organize this sorts of stuff. Like, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And not, there should be a way of doing that without putting a target on your back.
Yeah. I think the way is to win. As long as your tribe keeps winning, you're okay.
Yeah. People like you.
But it's the same thing like in like pro sports, right? Where the first person to take the fall when like a team underperforms is the head coach. Almost always, right? Where even if it's not necessarily that person's fault, it's like, like that's the first and easiest person to cut, right? It's like, oh, just fire the coach.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of times, you'll see that it goes further downhill at that point. But that's like an easier call or a scapegoat, Yeah.
So welcome to our Detroit Lions podcast.
Are we talking about like NFL officiating? If that's the case,
we could just talk about their game this week against the Vikings, where it was their fault. So, so take that, Packers fans. We don't claim everybody's against us.
We could do a whole podcast on NFL referees, by the way.
I'm sure it exists. The only good thing to come out of the post-reward challenge scene was this clip that I plan to use pretty frequently.
I didn't know that Jesus had a vested interest in Survivor.
I thought that was really funny.
Yeah.
That's, of course, comes from their analysis of Joanna, who, according to the men's tribe, is always yelling and singing about Jesus, but according to Rob, he didn't know Jesus cared about Survivor.
That's why they lose.
I guess so. He does then follow that up with, as far as I can tell, Jesus is a man, so he would probably want us to win.
Yes, he did say that.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the beginning of some of these alliances that we see come together on the men's tribe this episode. You see Rob and Alex have a conversation where they're kind of teaming up and cementing their alliance. And then you also see the same from Dave and Matthew. Kind of putting their relationships officially as an alliance. What did y'all think about, what was your reaction to these conversations that happened? Did they seem like these would be fruitful? Did they seem too early? Are these natural pairs? Are they confusing? What was your take on these early alignings and what you think it might mean for this tribe and the game going forward?
I think Rob is playing a game from a different season. Like he's coming at this the way someone from a much later season will come at this. Just from his reactions, from the way he got really excited about things and whatnot. Whereas everyone else seems to be like just burgeoning strategy. And Rob was kind of like, this is what I've been thinking for like days now.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Like, it's interesting to see that because we talked about Survivor becoming a strategic game and, you know, how it sort of changes. And you see that here. Everything else felt pretty natural. I feel like they just don't have a grasp on what they really want to do or who to trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Rob enters this season as one of the first smart strategic players, right? And that some of the other strategic players that maybe have played up to this point are like purely villains, you know, who are like cutthroat strategic. And even someone like a Johnny Fairplay in the following season is definitely a highly strategic player, but yeah, comes at it from this like cutthroat conniving way. Whereas Rob is like one of the first examples of like an obvious student of the game who loves Survivor and is played as like a root forable character, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why, a lot of people remember him and a lot of people, point to him as like one of the favorite players early in the seasons. What do you guys think about Dave and Matthew? You see Matthew, or maybe just Matthew in general, because we haven't really talked about him yet. We see him early in this episode speaking Mandarin with Daniel and creating a connection point there. And then he and Dave start to link up too. What do you guys think about that pair? What do you think about Matthew in general? Scott, do you have thoughts?
I'm kind of like you. Like we haven't really seen that much of him to this point. He's just kind of like there, so it is kind of cool to like see him, I guess, getting some play. The Mandarin stuff I thought was pretty interesting, and it would have been cool to kind of see what would have maybe happened had that been able to play a couple more episodes out.
Mm-hmm.
I did think it was kind of, I don't know. Daniel I was like, why would you, like at tribal council, they asked him, he's like, yeah, we talked Mandarin to each other. I'm like, why would you say that? But
they showed Matthew's face when he said that too. Matthew just said like big eyes. Like, I don't know if he wanted to share that.
Yeah. I really loved that moment. That seemed like that was really cool to me and a cool like storytelling choice to include that in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think like Daniel kind of talked about it at tribal council where he felt sort of like an outsider in the tribe. And like that was his like insider moment is like, we have this thing that like no one else has. Like it was cool. Like it definitely, it was a little undercut by the Oriental-ish music that they had playing underneath it. But
I didn't even notice that. Woof.
Come on, Survivor.
But it was cool. And it was it was a moment where you kind of wanted to, even if you weren't rooting for Daniel before that, you kind of had this like, oh, like he could be a cool player in this game.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to also talk about the montage of when the women's tribe starts to do the like work around camp, kind of get their act together. It starts with like the rhythmic beat of Shauna like chopping wood, and then we get like the cling of like a hatchet. You know what I'm saying? And we turn this.
It
we
was
turn
like
into this.
Stomp, Survivor.
Survivor Stomp.
It was when Stomp became it was like early 2000s when Stomp was becoming a big thing. So
You're
I'm
probably
sure
right.
it was 100% that.
Yeah, Jeff was in the editing booth like, guys, we have to make Stomp on Survivor. Jeff, how are we going to do that?
It's happening right now.
I'm not really sure. It's happening right now.
There it is.
The Stomp clips. Yeah, loved the diegetic noise beat montage at the women's tribe. I was watching that and I'm like, are you kidding me? Why did they do this?
Well, in 2003, a Dolby Digital trailer featuring Stomp performances debuted in cinemas worldwide, and the following year, an Emmy-nominated sequence was created for ABC Sports coverage for the World Figure Skating Championships. Stomp was just becoming huge at that point.
Stomp.
Stomp.
Stomp and figure skating seem like the two like diametrically opposed things.
You just hear like swishing of skates, like
they just clink a bunch of
That's
metal
all.
together. Yeah, that was weird.
But it was supposed to be symbolic of the women finally being in sync, right?
Yeah. They are now achieving harmony and rhythm.
Right.
Was this when they contrasted that with the men just asking the Magic 8-Ball questions?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, because
That
they
came
were
right
like
afterwards.
getting ready for battle on the
Men are like, hey, am I going to get with so-and-so?
Yeah. That was another like really strong like use of editing. Where this whole commercial break is about how the women's tribe is like getting their act together. They're catching fish. They're cleaning up their camp. They're like on the upswing, and then the men in their cockiness are all sitting over there playing with the Magic 8-Ball. Which
There are spirits in this jungle, and through the magic of the Magic 8-Ball, I can channel and harness those spirits.
And honestly, that seems like cheating that they do have access to the spirits of the jungle, but
it's true.
you know,
Well, Joanna though.
Joanna does too. You're right.
Brings spirituality to her tribe, so maybe the forces are
Joanna versus the Magic 8-Ball.
They're balanced.
yes.
on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did it surprise you to learn that Rob was in a fraternity?
Yeah.
Because my answer is 0.
Yeah, 0.
Yeah. I'd sign on to that. But like, yeah, the hard cuts from the boys with their Magic 8-Ball to the like, the war drums on the other side was really, really clever and like good editing. And it's what you were talking about too, like Adam, like at that point, there is no way that the women lose that tribe.
No.
Like, or lose that challenge.
Especially since, like, if they lose that, then what you've done is you've set the audience up for a massive amount of disappointment.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was no way they were losing after that.
So the immunity challenge, Adam, you said you really enjoyed this one. Can you point to why you liked it so much?
Well, I think it required a lot of people to be involved. And I think generally when we're doing these sorts of challenges, it's like there are these two people doing something. Mm-hmm. And then there are these two people doing something. Yeah. And then and this was like, there's a bunch of knots. Like,
go to town.
Work them all out together. Like, so I don't know. There's something about like everybody had to be involved. That was really nice that Survivor has a hard time doing sometimes. It was also, I don't know, it was a good, like, kind of tense challenge there for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
When we were walking up in it, I made the joke that finally Survivor is finally going to do an escape room. And then he described what was going to happen, and they did an escape room.
Yeah, basically.
So it was, I don't know, I just, like, it's not far and away my favorite challenge by any means, but I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was a good remix of all the elements that they usually do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think if it would have been closer, it would have been a lot better for me, at least.
Yeah,
that was like the only letdown.
It
but
should have been.
I agree with you though.
I was
just like, oh, sorry, I just gotta keep interrupting you.
No,
but
you're fine.
I was just gonna say, like, I can't believe like they can't the guys could not just cut a night, cut like the rope with a freaking machete.
Yeah, I was confused by that. Yeah, like why couldn't they get through that rope?
Yeah, I don't know. It's almost like Survivor scripted or something.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, something to consider, right?
Sonic the Hedgehog style.
Boom, Sonic the Hedgehog style.
I had the thought during this one, like, of how different these challenges look from like a shooting perspective. Man, like it was all like handheld cameras right in the faces, like from right outside the cages, which is just such an odd, watching modern Survivor where you have like 40 cameras hundreds of feet away, just like shooting extreme, like zoomed in shots, that are very clearly shot from very far away. It's just weird to see challenges shot differently,
Yeah, it's one of those things that like you see the production, like the amount of money that they're putting into production going up as the seasons progress, obviously. But this in particular, this challenge was kind of like, where are the good angles for this?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so it was like, it's just like it's a hard thing to shoot where you're like, well, we could put 7 cameras inside the cube, but it's 2003, so GoPros aren't a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you talked about the like the budget going up, and now we're like in current Survivor. This is like a conversation now where they're like trying to cut back on the operating costs, which is really interesting. With some of the like ways that they're doing that, there's like fewer reward challenges, fewer like getaway rewards. They even introduced an entire bad twist last season to like cut out on having to house people who were voted out, so it's interesting. But yeah, you see the evolution of the budget and perhaps now the decline of it. So yeah, before Tribal Council, one of the major players in driving what's going on at the men's tribe after they get thoroughly pounded is Dave, who we've talked about a little bit, but not a ton yet. What do you guys make of Dave to this point in the game? Emily, do you have any strong takes or opinions on Dave? Bangarang Dave?
He's the rocket scientist who wears the... What's this?
The puka shells.
The puka shells, right?
Correct.
Yeah. The thing that really burns my head is burns in my mind, rather. I don't know. Leave me alone.
It really just gets my go.
Oh gosh. Is his lovely comments about the women's tribe. However, besides that, I know that he was making some moves. I feel like he has been kind of unremarkable up to this point. Perhaps I just have ignored him. I'm not sure. Has anyone else noticed anything? My short answer is I don't notice much.
Yeah. Scott, Dave is on your tribe and even the namesake of your tribe. Do you have what's your opinion on Dave's game?
Bangarang baby.
Bangarang.
Bangarang. I'm kind of like with Emily, like he had like that one big soundbite like 1 or 2 episodes ago, and since then, like just kind of like he's just kind of there. I believe he was wanting to go after Alex, this episode, which I thought was kind of interesting because we don't really know that much about Alex either, at least maybe I don't from my visual experience. So I don't know. I guess I didn't really understand where he was getting from, but
Yeah, what's like interesting to me about Dave at this point is that he seems to be really perceptive of the strategy that's going on around him, of like people forming alliances and pairing off, but yet he is like against it and like unwilling to embrace it, which I find to be an interesting combination at this stage in Survivor, where he's recognizing strategy, but he's not willing to say like, and that's the game we're playing, you know?
He like simultaneously he simultaneously walks around like he's running the game in some way and also has no clue what's happening.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand his like strategy in any way. I don't know. He seems very like short focused. He's like
short.
Like we're not dominant, we're not winning, so why do we care about anything else? Like
yeah.
He just kind of like, he had like the one big soundbite about like, oh, the girls beat us, blah, blah, blah. And then he like talks about like, oh, we're a bunch of guys. We don't want to lose to all these girls, blah, blah. And I don't know. He's just there.
Yeah. He is the youngest guy on this tribe too, which is not worth nothing.
He is the youngest?
He's the youngest guy out there.
So he's not a rocket scientist.
He's a 23-year-old rocket scientist.
He's a rocket scientist major.
Yeah, I was gonna say he studied rocket science.
He studied aeronautics, and they were like, "Can we call you a rocket scientist?" And he was like, "I mean, I work on jet engines." And he were like, "Okay, fine,
close enough." Rocket scientist.
Yeah, Jeff just wanted a rocket scientist.
That's like, I don't know. I always see like the names that they pick for like people's professions, and I wonder how much of that is like.
Yeah. I've heard like in exit interview stuff and, you know, like post game stuff, Survivor players talking about like, yeah, I haven't been a bartender for 5 years, but that's what they put on there, you know, things like that. Yeah.
Well, even when you said that, I was like, I don't know what my title would be. Because
yeah, I've thought about that too.
That would be confusing.
Coffee roaster.
Yeah, you'd be fine.
It probably wouldn't be roaster though. It'd probably be like coffee
shop owner,
like
or like
entrepreneur or something.
Yeah,
it could be.
Unless they wanted to paint you as like an immature millennial, then you'd just be like a barista.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Actually, Scott.
That's very astute. Yeah.
The problem is they couldn't, because every single episode I'd just be like, well, when I work for my company, Circadian Coffee.
Yeah. Yeah, they would cut all
phone
that.
number, Instagram handle.
Yeah, that's like a
t-shirt.
I guess, yeah. they could play you up for sure.
Scott, I love that idea where you just like show up to Survivor and like the name, a t-shirt that reads, the name of my company is Circadian Coffee. Call this number to get in contact with us. Like, I'm just so overt.
I just don't know what Adam's in. Like, why is he on the show? I don't get it.
So what do you do
How much
again?
did he pay to get this advertising?
Well, speaking of, let's talk about, what's her name? Jenna?
Yes.
She's wearing her Greek letters all the time.
Yeah.
The Zeta.
Rush Zetas.
She's got a shirt that says Rush Zetas.
We're big Zetas stands out here. I wonder how many people rushed Zetas after watching Jenna play this season.
I
wonder how many of those shirts the producers bought her.
Yeah. Yeah, like it furthers the like persona that they're going for with her though, right?
It really
like,
does. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah, sorority girl.
And we've talked about
shocked.
We've talked about in the past about how like the producers will tell people like, this is the type of clothing that we need you to wear, and
sure, yeah,
whatnot. So it's like, I don't know. Like, I think handing someone fraternity letters or Greek letters and being like, this is your identity now would be kind of weird. But
yeah, to be fair, I obviously don't have a perfect understanding of this because I never played Survivor, but my understanding of how that works is you pack the stuff that you're like going to wear or want to wear. You pack like a number of outfits or whatever that they probably give some sort of like guidelines towards, you know, like not big logos, whatever. Right. And then from what you bring,
we know
they say,
that like
wear these
Braun
things.
Beauty had color things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, they like choose what you wear out of what you bring, but they don't like hand you a wardrobe to wear.
Yeah.
At Tribal Council, then it's the conversation is between Daniel and Roger. We talked off the top about how maybe it was a little confusing that things landed on Daniel. Do you guys think that voting him out over Roger at this point in the game was a mistake for this tribe, or for any players in particular, or is it just a more general lack of understanding?
I don't feel like it mattered.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I think Daniel was kind of robbed of the opportunity to play the game in a way. Like, I feel bad for Daniel, and he brought up some very like real, I feel like an outsider. And Rob was kind of like, no one here has said that you're an outsider. And it's kind of this moment of Daniel can look at him and be like, yeah, that's what you don't get. Like, you're treating me like an outsider, even though you're not explicitly saying it. Like, I get that.
And then he was voted out.
And then he was voted out. And like, that kind of sucked, like from like a narrative perspective or whatever. But I don't feel like they made the right or the wrong choice. It just feels like they made a choice. And, you know, these early votes are just so hard to like gauge. Was it a good decision? No idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of it,
the play yet.
Yeah. A lot of it comes down to like, is this somebody that you can work with in the future, I think. And calling off those that don't. You brought up that interesting point though about what Daniel says at Tribal Council, where he says, yeah, like as the only like non-white person here, I feel like an outsider. And then Rob's responds with, yeah, you kind of summed it up, but basically, you know, like none of us view you as an outsider because of your race. You know, we don't, see that as like a factor in this, you know, which I think is just a really interesting conversation and back and forth that almost like points to kind of like the unfortunate reality of race in Survivor sometimes, where, like Rob's response here was an attempt to be like kind, right? Like it came from a good hearted place, but like it also kind of misrepresented the reality that like, like what you said too, Adam, that even if they don't intend for him to be made an outsider, that like the reality is that probably had at least some part in it being that way, you know?
Well, and it's wild that like this is a conversation that we still kind of have, that we still have today. Not kind of. I said that. I immediately regret saying kind of, but like this is a conversation we still have today in 2019. And so in some sense, like we've seen the like Roger went off about like gay people for what in episode like 2 or something like that. Yeah. That we've seen progress on. Yeah. That definitely there are still LGBTQ identifying people who are targeted and you know made to feel less than today, but hopefully it's not as bad. And racial and you know the race perspective, it's hopefully not as bad too, but it's still a conversation that we're having. So it's interesting that like 2003 someone said it, someone had those words, and we saw this conversation still happening.
Yeah, and I think it like represents the evolution of the conversation from like it maybe what would be common in this time of the like we don't see race sort of response, which maybe at this point was seen as like, oh yeah, like a kind, good thing to say. Whereas now you'd say like, oh, that's not helpful. You know, it's like, no, it's like we see the differences and like uniquenesses of the race and like validate and like celebrate those things. Not everybody is the same. So yeah, to your point too about that, like light spoilers for the current season of Survivor that we will forget by the time we get there. But the third person voted out recently was a guy named Vince, who is a gay Asian fellow. And you remember Bryce from Cagayan, the gay black fellow. He like tweeted
we miss a big opportunity with him.
Yes, but he like tweeted out, he's like, there it is, the minority gay third boot. Like sad and funny, but also sad. So yeah, there's like this unfortunate reality where in the history of Survivor, I think on aggregate, if you're to run the numbers, if you're a person of color, you're more likely to be voted out pre-merge than if you're not. And if Survivor is the ultimate social experiment, then that should maybe say something about the world we live in, unfortunately.
That's all I keep coming back to with this, honestly.
Yeah.
Even in the way that, because remember in an earlier episode, I was like, I just have to think of this as a social experiment in order to watch it.
Sure.
But in the next episode, not to like tease too much, but you start to see it in this episode too. The women's tribe, the younger women are starting to group together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting how people find similarities and kind of group around that.
In this episode, they explicitly say like the reason we're grouping together is because we're young and we're hot and we have these, we're skinny bodies and we don't want old people to look at us and make us feel bad about who we are.
Yeah, which is all kinds of layers of terrible, but
right. which in again, like this is one of those things that like I'm sure to some extent the person was like, okay, I think it was Heidi or whoever it was like, okay, saying, or like wouldn't be like, oh yeah, like that's explicitly wrong. But like, I'm sure this is one of those things that a producer or someone kind of pushed like, hey, can you say something to this? And it gets edited in a way that you're kind of like, now in 2019, 16 years later, you know,
yeah,
kind of shudder at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Look at us, guys. We're learning about the world at large through this television show.
Yeah.
We're learning about the world that we grew up in and learned from.
And the reason why we're all now see counselors and yeah.
I think Dave Chappelle has a bit about watching like Pepe Le Pew with his like nephew, and he's like, as a kid I thought that was hilarious, and now I'm just looking at a rapist skunk, and like, you're like, oh yeah, that is the world you grew up in.
Yeah,
yeah.
Tough stuff. Anything else from this episode before we move on to our fantasy points? Cool. Last episode, we did our draft, and we talked about the scoring, and I made a few minor changes to the scoring after we did our first round of scoring. Those are in the past, going into this episode before it was 10 points for winning immunity or reward. I changed that so it's still 10 points for immunity, but just 5 for reward. I feel like that weighs things a little bit more fairly as far as their importance. And then also previously it was 10 points for surviving tribal council. I split that up into 5 points for surviving tribal and 5 points for voting correctly. That way, there is still a little bit of a penalty if you, do survive a tribal council, but you are on the wrong side of the votes. That way we reward, people who have an idea of where things are going and vote, down the line. So, all that being said, here are our tribes. Nobody had Daniel on their tribe because you guys voted correctly, or you drafted well. Adam, you've got Heidi, Matthew, Butch, and Shauna. That's the Believe in Yourself and Aliens tribe. Emily's Poison Dart Frogs tribe. We've got Rob, Gene, Christy, and Roger. And then Scott's tribe, Bangarang, features Alex, Dina, Jenna, and Dave. And wouldn't you know it, folks? That's an even 50 points per tribe, because all of the men got 10 points for voting correctly and surviving tribal. All of the women got 15 points for winning immunity and winning reward. And all of you have an evenly split 2-man and 2-woman tribe. So 50 points for everyone.
Bangarang.
We did
it. Wonderful. How is everybody feeling about the state of their tribes one episode in? Nobody lost a member, but were you pleased with the showings of your tribe members to this point?
Roger seems kind of like a jerk, but he's doing well.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I feel really good about the women on my tribe.
Dina and Jenna.
Yeah, I think it's good. Like Dina got kind of put in a tough spot, but I think she's rallying the troops, and I think that's going to bode well. I hope.
I'm slightly concerned that Heidi and Shauna are my 2 female tribe people, because they're in the same like group.
Yeah, it's like doubling down.
Yeah, which I'm not a fan of, but like they could be good. I don't know. And I feel solid about the fact that Butch was like basically non-existent in the episode.
Yeah.
Little concerned about
Butch.
Matthew, but you know, we'll see.
Cool.
Seems to have a relatively strong social game. Could be my Jeremiah. We don't know.
Oh, Jeremiah.
I hope I earned some major man points today.
Let's bring back something that I forgot to do the first 2 episodes of this season and close out by naming our Outwatch MVPs. This will be the moment where each of us take the episode into account and say who was the highest performing player from this episode. Adam, would you like to go first and name your MVP?
I am going to give it up to Dina, who was thrust into leadership and handled it extremely well. Got the women's tribe into shape, and I feel like she had a great episode.
All right, Emily, how about you?
Well, that was my answer.
You can take it. You can take the same answer.
But yeah, thank you. I will. I will take that. I will echo what Adam said.
All right. You know what? I'm going to start something this season 2 where I tally our MVP points. This will be just for fun to see who came away with the most MVP points at the end of the season. Scott, who's your Outwatch MVP?
I'm actually in agreement with everybody else. I was going to pick Dina.
Dina for Scott, and make it 4 for me. I think this is a really strong episode from Dina. She, like Adam said, gets handed the mantle of leadership. And at least from the story we're presented, that's exactly what they need. They go from having bugs in their food to fishing large bass and winning 2 challenges, looking like they're in the driver's seat. That will just about do it from this episode of Outwatch. Thank you for listening. Make sure that you subscribe to our feed so you don't miss an episode. Follow us on Twitter at Outwatch Podcast and tweet at us your responses to each episode's opening question. What would you do if you had to introduce yourself to somebody on the other tribe? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time in episode 4 of Survivor, the Amazon, titled Trapped. Thanks. We'll see you then.